We recognize that CVUUS gathers on land seized from the Western Abenaki people by European colonizers. We respect the Abenaki's spiritual relationship to the land and waters of the Champlain Valley, and we are committed to building a peaceful and more just relationship with them and to promoting knowledge about their history and culture. Good morning. I have to say, I love the energy when people come a little bit early before the service begins. My name is Abby Sessions, and I am a member of this congregation and a member of the worship team. Today, I serve as worship associate for a service led by my friend Carl Lindholm, where we remember those who have gone before at this time of year, when some say the veil between the living and the departed is the thinnest. Whatever your beliefs, your origins, whatever your way of being, you are welcome here. We are a strong and caring community committed to both nurturing our own spiritual well-being and to working together in the larger community to build a better world. I have to draw your attention to the order of service for a moment. After the chalice lighting, we will be singing together the song Breaths, which is in your teal hymnal, number 1001. The words will also appear on the screen. It was simply left out of the printed order of service by mistake. If you're new to our community, we invite you and encourage you to sign the guest book in the lobby so that we might get to know you better. For those of you who are with us in the sanctuary, this would be a great time to turn off your cell phones. And please remember to join us downstairs in the fellowship hall for some socializing after the service. There are many pathways for us to connect with one another and with the larger world in this active community. You can read about them in our weekly email blast or your printed order of service. I'd just like to draw your attention to a few highlights. This afternoon at 2:00, we will gather here for a memorial service for longtime CVUUS member Kate Castor, who passed away on October 14th at the age of 80. All are welcome to join us in remembering Kate. We will have an open mic night on Saturday, November 12th from 7 to 9 p.m. downstairs, right, in the fellowship hall? Huh? Oh, here somewhere, to be determined. We encourage you to consider performing, attending, and bringing a friend. There will be sign-ups on Sunday during social hour, and the music ministry team hopes to include performers of all ages. So don't be shy, no matter what your age or what your talent. There will be a honk and wave in Middlebury on November 4th from 4 to 6 p.m. to support the Vermont Reproductive Liberty Act. If you would like to know how to participate, you can talk with Ash at the rear of the sanctuary in the gray, waving at us, honking. Now honk too, Ash, and we'll have the whole effect. You can speak with her after the service downstairs. And don't forget, downstairs, there's information about the Radical Love Party coming up, an important community builder in our congregation. Gathering song.
The call to worship today is by Kathleen McTeague. Kathleen McTeague, I remember she spoke at Middlebury on one of the occasions when the Dalai Lama was here. She's a wonderful writer and a Unitarian minister. And it's called They Are With Us Still. In the struggles we choose for ourselves, in the ways we move forward in our lives and bring our world forward with us, it is right to remember the names of those who gave us strength in this choice of living. It is right to name the power of hard lives well lived. We share a history with those lives. We belong to the same motion. They too were strengthened by what had gone before. They too were drawn by the vision of what might come to be. Those who lived before us, who struggled for justice and suffered injustice before us, have not melted into the dust and have not disappeared. They are with us still. The lives they lived hold us steady. Their words remind us and call us back to ourselves. Their courage and love evoke our own. We, the living, carry them with us. We are their voices, their hands, and their hearts. We take them with us, and with them choose the deeper path of living. They are with us still. Their lives hold us steady. Their courage and love evoke our own.
Our chalice lighting today. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have light. No, that's a bad one. Sorry, Carl was about to light the plastic candle on fire. There. Whoa. Okay. Sorry. We're having some chat. So, good morning. Um, this is the time for all ages, and all of our kids who are often here for this part are gone already because they are baking cookies for Abolition Kitchen, which bakes food for Black activists and community members on the first Friday of each month. And it takes time to bake cookies. So they're already gone. So this time for all ages is really just a time for all people who aren't kids. So I'm going to talk about ancestors, and specifically, I want to think about the idea of ancestors that are not actual relations. So an ancestor that is not from my bloodline or family. And the person that I want to tell you about today is a Unitarian ancestor from 200 years ago. She was Black and female and a total badass, if I'm allowed to say that word in church, which I just did, so I guess so. So her name was Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, and I'm interested to know if any of you have ever heard that name. Right, so we have our minister and the person who teaches literature at Middlebury College. So I just want you to check out what I'm about to tell you about this person and ponder to yourself, why is it that you have never heard of this person? So Frances Ellen Watkins Harper was born about 200 years ago in 1825 in the state of Maryland, which at that time was a slave state. She was born free, as all of us should be, to free parents who died when she was really little. So she was an orphan and was raised by her aunt and uncle. And the stuff that she went on to do is like the amount of things that you would be lucky to have our entire congregation do in a 100-year period. And the fact that it was just her, and she was female, and she was Black is mind-blowing. So I'm just going to take you quickly through the timeline of some of the things. And she's so inspiring to me because she was tenacious and worked on stuff at a time when not only was it, hard to bring things up, but it was dangerous for her to bring things up as a Black woman at that time. So she was a poet and a writer. She was the first Black woman in the United States to publish a short story. She was one of the first Black women in the United States to publish a novel. A lot of the stuff she wrote was really popular and got reprinted many, many times, especially her novels. She wrote multiple novels, multiple books of poetry, and they focused on, for the most part, anti-slavery and the suffering of enslaved people and the suffering that caused humanity. She cared a lot about the idea that what affects me affects you, that my joy and liberty are connected to your joy and liberty, at a time when people were not really considering that a lot. So she was intersectional, right? The idea that one oppression can also be wrapped into, I guess I don't need to hold my water bottle while I do this, right? That one oppression and another oppression that they're interwoven, right? Intersectional. So poverty is related to race, is related to gender, etc. Yeah. So she was a writer. Then she was a speaker. She, if you read descriptions of her speaking at the time, she was described as a fiery orator
who had a beautiful musical voice. She spoke to sold out crowds of white and Black people all over the country. She traveled around Canada. She made a living off of her writing for a while. She made a living off of her speaking for a while. I know I have all these notes that I don't have time to tell you every single thing. You're going to have to look her up to find some of the tiny details. But so in 1858, right before the Civil War, where is this? In Philadelphia, she refused to see if this sounds familiar to you. She refused to give up her seat or move to the colored section of a trolley in Philadelphia, about 100 years before Rosa Parks. And after the Civil War ended, she went down to the South and spent a lot of time traveling around educating the freed Black people who were desperately, desperately in need of education, especially the ability to read and write. So then she moved on. Because that wasn't enough to do in one lifetime. Then she moved on to be a suffragette. So she was fighting for the rights of women to vote. I mean, I guess it's not moved on because it's intersectional, right? So it's near the same time. But she was on platforms with Susan B. Anthony, with Elizabeth Stanton, with the white women whose names many of you have probably heard. But when you read their histories and what they wrote about these times and their speeches and where they went, you will notice that her name really does not show up much. She was the only woman to often show up at abolitionist groups, meetings, organizations. She was the only Black person to often show up at suffragette meetings, speeches, organizations. She formed the National Association of Colored Women, along with several other organizations. She worked with Sojourner Truth, Frederick Douglass, who actually tried to get her to step down from a position of leadership in one of the organizations she did that was about anti-slavery, because he felt like a man should really get to be in that position and that she should step down. And she said no. Woohoo. Sorry, this was a hard one to do because there was so much stuff that I realized that really I could do like an entire service about this. And there probably should be one someday. She became a Unitarian when she was 45. So she moved to Philadelphia because at some point Maryland was not a safe place for her to stay anymore as a Black woman, even though she was freed. So she moved to Philadelphia and she got involved in the Unitarian Church, the first Unitarian Church of Philadelphia. She would do poetry readings there. I love thinking of the idea that like somebody who's here now in our congregation, you know, who gets up and reads poetry is maybe going to be talked about someday, like I'm talking about Ms. Harper. And she became a Unitarian because she believed that God was kind and loving. So Unitarians were Christian, and she believed that God was kind and loving. She deeply believed in the teachings and ethics of Jesus, and that drove a lot of the work that she did with people all over the country and what she wrote about and what she fought for. I mean, her religion was underneath all of that. And she believed in the humanity and dignity of people. And again, the idea that her humanity was tied up with your humanity, with your humanity, with your humanity. And I want to close with a quote from her. Just give me one moment. Okay, so this is a quote from one of her speeches called We are all bound up together. Delivered in 1866. So this is right after the Civil War, right? Yes, thank you. Okay, not a history major. Delivered in 1866 at the National Women's Rights Convention in New York City. She was there speaking with Susan B. Anthony at the time. She said, "We are all bound up together in one great bundle of humanity." And the quote is often ended there. Like, this is a quote that I've seen places. You can buy it on t-shirts if you want to right now. But I want to read you the rest of the quote that was left off of the quote that is the most famous. "And society cannot trample on the weakest and feeblest of its members without receiving the curse in its own soul." So that part didn't make it to the t-shirts. So I wanted to share her with you because she was just a mind-blowing person. And the fact that she did what she did 200 years ago as a woman, as a Black person, she was a mother, she was a widow who kept supporting herself and her daughter by doing the work that I've talked about. For me as a UU, she is a faith ancestor for me. And I think it's really worth thinking about who are your ancestors besides the people you're related to, right? Because you might even have relations that they're your ancestors, but they didn't do stuff that you really want to keep moving forward. But for her, I hope that in some small way, I am somehow moving her work forward, right? I'm here able to do the work that I'm doing partially because of everybody who came before, and especially Unitarian and Universalist and Unitarian Universalist ancestors. So what I will leave you with today is thinking about not only the idea of who are the ancestors that you want to keep moving their breath forward, right? We are our ancestors' breath, but also when your kids or grandkids or people that you know or work with now look back on me, what do we hope that they will say about us as ancestors? Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. So Frances Ellen Watkins was her name, and then Harper was her married name. So look her up. She's pretty amazing. She has a quote on the wall of the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American Culture. Oh, well, and now we're going to sing the kids out, which means you're going to sing me out. So I got to pick the song. So we don't usually do it. It is by Sister Sledge. It is the chorus of We Are Family. So rise in body or spirit and put your heart into it. And we'll go through it, just the chorus a couple times. Oh, and you'll notice I got all my sisters to siblings.
This is a time in our service when we take the offering. This is the 5th Sunday of October, so we have a different donee. We split our offering 50-50 with church needs and needs in the larger community. Barnaby reminded me this morning that on fifth Sundays, we often choose an organization different. We do choose an organization different from the other 4 Sundays, but we often choose an organization that's responding in a timely fashion to something that has occurred recently. And this week, our donee is called Caritas, which is a relief organization for Puerto Rico. This is a recommendation of a former member of this congregation, Steve Trombulak, who spends half his year in Puerto Rico and is very much in touch with people who are doing good work on the island of Puerto Rico. So this organization, Caritas, is recommended to us by Steve Trombulak. So I hope you can give as generously as you're able. I didn't notice any yellow cards in the offering basket, nor have I received any, but there was one sent ahead of time. A sad note from Francois Clemens. I'm very sad to inform you. I'm going to read what Francois sent. I'm very sad to inform you that yesterday, Friday, October 28th, I had the vet put Princess Nepal down. Any of you who know Francois will know how important Princess was in his life and what a dear she was. She was a Tibetan terrier. She was rife with cancer and it had made it nearly impossible to breathe. I'm deeply saddened, even though I had 15 years of love and dedication with her and shall never forget her. So sorry for your loss, Francois. And now we all bring hearts full of joy and concern from a week of living. And here's the time to acquaint yourself more deeply with what is on your heart and mind.
symbols tenderly are laid away. The face, the hand, the form we cannot say. The Spirit still is with us day by day. And there is love. And there is love. We cannot see beyond this earthly rim, but did we know at birth the world reared in? Then we can trust our future life to win, for there is love. For there is love. When human hands cannot afford relief to hopeless ills and pain beyond relief, when human hearts are stunned and dumb with grief, still there is love. Still there is love.
In my search for a reading as a prelude to this service, I found a new book and a new author at the bookstore. This is a book of poems called Floaters, written by Martin Espada. So I'm reading the words of a Puerto Rican immigrant poet. The story of how we came to America. I remember the tale of my grandfather, the gambler, tipped off that the cops would raid his speakeasy, selling the club to another gambler, fleeing Puerto Rico before somebody could press a gun to his skull and scatter his brains through his white straw hat. That is the story of how the Espada family came to America. My father once said, "That never happened. And besides, you should wait till people are dead to tell stories like that." Now people are dead, and I am telling stories like that.
This service is a reprise of one we did last year that people seem to appreciate. I offered a brief reflection on, I offered a reflection on my Swedish immigrant forebears, which Margie will put up a picture very briefly, emphasizing my great grandfather, Carl, with a C, who came to America in the 1890s with his family. But I was particularly moved by the fact that his wife, my great grandmother, Carlotta, was unable to join them as she had a chronic condition that would have precluded her entering the US. The seven members of her family came over in 2 trips, and she remained in Sweden for the rest of her life. It's very moving to me. So those who offering reflections today, people who have come before them and who inspire or fascinate them, are Tom Morgan, Becky Strum, Liam Batchis, and Lynn Ballman. Now, Lynn can't be here today. She has been called away on an urgent matter. And her reflection will be incorporated into next week's service by Barnaby. So, Tom.
I'm grateful for this opportunity to remember my grandfather, Oscar Bell Haney. Though he passed on 45 years ago, I can still hear the timbre of my grandfather's voice reading aloud to me and my grandmother as we sat on the front porch of their 2-bedroom row house in High Point, North Carolina. He was a simple lion of a man who lived lessons for a lifetime. My grandfather was curious and humble. I think he read about just about everything. He made it only through 3rd grade before he had to go to work to support his family, but he had access to books and he consumed them. He knew the classics in history. He loved the wonders of nature and science. He would talk about scripture, focusing more on the lessons of compassion than on the dogmatic codes and judgments. He would talk about ideas when he took me fishing. He exhibited the relationship between curiosity and humility. A self-possessed man, he intensely listened. He listened intensely and not autobiographically. He listened to learn and not compete. He laughed easily but spoke softly and rarely about himself. Dickens could have written my grandfather's beginnings. Oscar Bell Haney was born in 1894 to an illiterate woman who earned money doing other people's laundry. His father was absent and unacknowledged. It would have been a scandal in the community if the community had learned what had happened between their privileged town doctor and the poor young woman that washed his family's clothes. But my father seemed completely devoid of bitterness or envy. He was a devoted son of a single mother, a loving partner of my grandmother Mary for over 60 years, and a doting father of 3 daughters who grew into beloved women themselves. My grandfather's experiences introduced me to the concept of duty and service above self. Drafted in 1917, Oscar was shipped to the Western Front of World War I. He was decorated for valor and was fighting in the Meuse-Argonne campaign when the armistice was announced November 11th, 1918. 26,000 Americans and 28,000 Germans had died during that 2-month offensive. 800 men dying daily in the mud and mustard gas. He rarely talked about the war, except to say it was hell on earth and that too many good men had died needlessly. My grandparents exemplified generosity. During the Depression, they housed and fed their immediate family, both their mothers and a recently arrived French immigrant grandpa had met during the war. My mother's older sisters would recall later in life that their home was stuffed with people, cooperation, and gratitude. My grandfather expanded their backyard garden and fruit orchard and made plots available to anyone who wanted one. Folks relied on that garden through the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, when segregationist city leaders pressed poor Black families into public housing behind my grandparents' row house. Oscar and Mary responded by helping the new neighbors grow and can vegetables and fruit to feed their families. A man of few privileges, my grandparents' actions teach that when we expend whatever we have to lift each other up, we all share in the harvest. My grandfather passed away in 1977, 8 years after my grandmother. Hundreds attended his funeral. As a seminarian, I know we sometimes mythologize the heroes of our stories. But maybe we could use more stories of more heroes whose superpowers are curiosity, humility, and generosity. W.E.B. Du Bois wrote, "Children learn more from what you are than what you teach." What is most remarkable about Oscar Bell Haney is what he was, a humble, loving, graceful, and good man. Thank you for helping me remember him today.
Here I am. My mother, Lonnie Anders, was a remarkable woman. Born and raised in the Deep South by racist, bigoted parents, she somehow overcame those values. I think in her early 20s. I'm not sure how. I never thought to ask her. She graduated from Stetson University, a Southern Baptist college in Florida, but then made her way to Western Reserve University, now Case Western Reserve in Ohio, to earn her master's in drama. She worked as an actor at the Cleveland Playhouse, and then during World War II, directed some of the first plays ever produced for television. I found the typed scripts with her notes in pen after she died in 1993. But for some reason after the war, she returned to her home in Jacksonville, Florida, took up teaching at Jacksonville University, and met and married my father, a Jew from Baltimore. I had a very difficult relationship with my mom, who suffered from addiction to alcohol. She was sober in my memory for only 3 years, second, third, and fourth grade. At one point, after my daughter Kate was born, my mother and I were estranged for 2 years. But I wanted to remember her here today because I have recently come to the understanding that she gave me 2 profound and precious gifts, and I never thanked her for them. The first was that she raised me and my siblings with a visceral awareness of the deep trauma of the racism upon which our country was built. While she rejected her parents' racism, she was never estranged from them. Most years, we traveled by train from our home in the Midwest to spend time with my grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins in Jacksonville, Florida, which, if you don't know, at least then was the Deep South, where signs on water fountains for whites and coloreds became seared into my memory. When I began about 10 years ago to understand and work on my own implicit biases, I found myself a little bit ahead of the game in that I somehow understood there was so much anti-racism work still to be done. I now know that that was a gift from my mom. I've often half jokingly called my participation in theater the family curse. My mom had worked professionally in the theater and in early television. My dad claimed to have hung out with the famous group theater in New York. We moved around a lot, and my parents often founded community theater groups in small Midwestern towns where we lived. I went to college hoping to major in political science, but quickly switched to English with heavy participation in theater, got 2 degrees in theater, and had a career acting, directing, and teaching theater. My brother is an actor. I used to feel that it was a curse, that I wish I had gone to law school or perhaps pursued a career as a scholar and teacher of women's studies. But after my husband Chuck's death, I have discovered that I have found the most meaning, that I feel the most whole, the most myself when I am making theater. And it is with love and appreciation that I thank and remember my mother for these 2 gifts so essential to who I am today.
There are amazing stories and amazing accomplishments. And then there are humble ones.
And this poem is about the artifacts that are simple objects that hold memories, memories of the past that shape who we are today. So I wrote this poem 5 years ago. It's called Finding a New Name in an Old Bottle by Liam Batches. A plastic blue bleach bottle with strands of graying suspenders dangled from the top shelf of the closet, almost out of tiptoe reach. I grabbed it, pulling it loose, and I giggled. My goodness, you kept it. Crazy, you kept it. My mother, gnarled by arthritis and old age, had been cleaning the family hoarding home, preparing for the limited storage of assisted living. The closets, attics, basement, and garage were slowly releasing their collective memories, one item at a time, wrapped in detailed description. Your grandfather did that, she announced with an emotional catch in her voice. That bottle is over 60 years old because the bleach was long gone before he tied the suspenders on. I don't know if the straps were his as a boy or Uncle Ben's, but it was his idea to make it into a toy. I know. This bottle is why I changed my name. I smiled, pulling at the plastic, the brittle plastic, and crusty clips, and remembering the snap it had a half century ago. My mother ignored my comment, as usual, and continued to name faded bleach brands and farmhouse rocking chairs and untimely deaths. But I heard laughter coming from a partial toothed grin on a man with sky blue eyes and wispy wild hair, jangling this bottle above my head in a personal dance. I stood between his strong, stumpy legs, trying to grab this bouncing blue with my small hands and laughing with him in the tension of affection. William's laughter abruptly ended when I was 3 years old, leaving me with this little scrap of a memory and a photograph of my grandfather's joyous embrace. I was safe. I was loved. I was a gift that he delighted in, entertaining with simple toys made from the jumbles of humble objects on the farm. For over 40 years, I had worn my father's name, a quiet man who confessed to not wanting children, while he patiently coped with the 5 that God gave him. After being tossed around by his tacit tolerance, I claimed the name of my grandfather, Liam, who welcomed me into the world and strapped his loving laughter to the bottle of my identity. Thanks to all who helped with this service. Margie on the machine back there, and Richard Hopkins, who was our gatherer, and Abby, of course, and Ronnie, not Robbie, with the choir and the piano. And of course, Mike Greenwood and the ushers and greeters, and of course, those who offered their wonderful reflections today, Tom and Becky and Liam. And we look forward to hearing Lynn next week. As this beautiful month comes to a close, October is really such a blessing. Every year we are struck anew by its beauty. Take the same pictures we took last year. Send them to friends who live elsewhere. October is a gift to us before we enter the hunkered down months. I invite you now to reflect on those who preceded you. Perhaps as Ronnie plays the postlude, and who are a part of you. And consider too your legatees, for whom you may be an ancestor, as Poppy suggested, who inspires or fascinates, or someone perhaps that will remember you as a beloved mentor. We end with these Native American words of wisdom. Beauty is before me and beauty behind me. Above me and below me hovers the beautiful. I am surrounded by it. I am immersed in it. In my youth, I am aware of it. And in my old age, I shall walk quietly the beautiful trail. In beauty, it is begun. In beauty, it is ended.